Okay,
Okay.
now we're live.
Hmm.
All right. I guess all the questions come up for you to see, so I don't have to go on there then, I guess. No.
Yeah, yeah. I'll see them. If anybody asks, I'll
Yeah.
let you know. Yeah.
All right. Hey, everyone. We are jumping on here. We wanted to, um, oops, we wanted to kind of have a discussion around our identity. Oops, sorry. I think this is still on. I'm trying to turn off my phone. I don't know how to turn it off.
You just turn the volume down, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. So we want to jump on here and just kind of have a discussion around um, our identity when it comes to our our health concerns, right? And how sometimes we can mistakenly merge our identity with maybe the health issue that we're facing in our lives at the moment, and just how detrimental that can be in term to be open to being for a different way of life, or being open to healing, or open to a different way of doing things that will kind of change your health. Because I think, and I know sometimes it's just even society kind of pushes us in that direction. I know you were talking earlier, Gigi, and you were talking about this idea that people identify and say, I'm a diabetic. That's an easy one. But even if you don't have a term, a lot of times we see ourselves as the illness that we're going through.
Hmm.
And sometimes that puts us in the box of whatever idea we have around that particular illness, right? So if you're like, well, my mother was a diabetic, my grandmother, my great grandmother, and so am I, there's a lot of limiting beliefs that are boxed into that identity. And so by you taking it on, just even not even knowingly, you fall into that trap sometimes,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And, it's really important that we pay very close attention to our identity because
Mhm.
it subconsciously, like, you don't always know that you're behaving in a way that corresponds with whatever identity you've taken
Mhm.
on.
Mhm.
But it does happen. Choices you make, decisions you make around. In this case, in the book, we talk about it in relation to food choices, for example.
Mhm.
And so if you've already taken that identity on, then you're less likely to make those behavioral changes that will lead to removing that identity. Because,
Mhm.
even though you don't necessarily want the diabetes, you've identified with it, and you subconsciously will naturally, you know, behave in a way that supports that identity,
Mhm. Yeah,
even
yeah.
to your detriment. So,
Even to your detriment. And this is why it is so important, as even coming from the Christian perspective, to really have your identity in Christ, because it is so easy to have your identity hijacked in society. Like, whether it's I'm a diabetic, I'm my job, my mother, whatever it is that can consume us. Sometimes it is so important that we're really centered in that area, because it can easily be hijacked and we don't even realize it. And so when you're living from that place of I'm a diabetic, or my mother has always had this. And so, because I know for myself, my grandmother had high blood pressure, my mom had high blood pressure. So when I was in diagnosed with high blood pressure during my pregnancy, honestly, I felt like, oh, wow, this is kind of early. Like, it was just something that I expected, because it was like, well, all the women in my family have it. So I just thought as a rite of passage, and it wasn't even so conscious, but it was kind of like how I thought. And I never once thought to challenge it, like to say, no, I don't want to have high blood pressure. What can I do to not, you know what I mean? I was just like, okay, this is kind of my lot. And so this can be a stumbling block for a lot of people, especially um, when you are trying to give them another way to say, listen, you don't have to be what your past generations were in the past.
Mhm.
Like, you can carve a new path, but sometimes if you don't address the fact that, you know what, I'm not going to identify myself as this. I understand that I have this. This is not what we're saying. You understand that I am dealing with this particular health issue, but it's not who I am. And I
Mhm.
think once we start doing that, then you kind of open yourself up to um to change, really.
Yep. Yeah. And, a lot of times too, that identity will also, be whispered in your ear when you
Mhm.
start to try to make changes, whispered in your
Mhm.
ear by the enemy who doesn't want
Mhm.
you to get any traction with making those changes.
Right.
Um, and I'm just gonna read a couple of the bullets in that section
Mhm.
of the book when
Mhm.
we're talking about the book, and the chapter is called Satan's Secret Weapon. So his lies may sound like this, and if this resonates with you, this is where you wanna get this book, Daniel Fast, Why You Should Only Do It Once. But his lies may sound like, I've had obesity and type 2 diabetes for such a long time, I can't be healed.
Mhm.
High blood pressure runs in my family. My mother had it, my grandmother had it, so it's my lot in life. I
Mhm.
am a diabetic. Why bother signing up for that mission trip? I'm too tired all the time. I don't have the energy.
Mhm.
And that's really, I think a wake-up call when you start noticing these limiting beliefs that you're telling
Mhm.
yourself, and they're rooted in, poor health based
Mhm.
on lifestyle behaviors, based on food choices,
Mhm.
based on, not taking care of yourself.
Mhm.
The good news is that a lot these lifestyle behaviors, if they brought you to sickness, changing those lifestyle behaviors can oftentimes restore your health and bring you back into wellness, because at the end of the day, as a believer, your energy level, your mental clarity, your spiritual clarity, your focus, your attention on doing what you're called to do, and is of utmost importance, right? And when you really embody that and take it to heart,
Mhm.
you're more likely to really get some good traction and find that solid why that we always talk about, to making those changes and making them stick long term.
Yeah, and that's why, from the perspective that we talk about doing the Daniel fast and eating like Daniel, when you eat like Daniel, and you give yourself that window of opportunity. That's how I almost like to call it.
Mhm.
When you give yourself that window of opportunity without limitations and without an end date, you don't go in there with a scheduled end date, because that's also, limiting belief. But when you give yourself some time to really step away from the foods that you're familiar with, from the foods that you've been eating, and really go all in. Gigi and I talk a lot about this idea that um, um, moderation is a myth, right?
Mhm.
When you give yourself that time to really eat the foods that are clean, eat the foods that are whole, without the process, without the toxicity, without anything, just real natural food, and get to see what it feels like to eat these foods, and how your body is adjusting, and how you have to pull away from these foods, because there's a lesson to learn even in the initial detox, right? Because when you start getting irritable, when you feel yourself scraping on the walls, for these foods, that also too is a learning process to say, wait a minute, I didn't even really know that I was that attached to these foods until went all in and gave myself the ability to see that. Because when we do things little by little, and we're like, you know what, I'm going to eat clean, 3 days a week, and then the weekends I'll give myself cheat days. And when we're juggling it, you don't get to really see what's really happening with you. You don't get to really see the relationship with food. You don't get to really see how attached you are. And what happens in that Daniel fast is you are starting to peel back the layers and begin to have an identity switch now, because now you're realizing, wait a minute, I never felt this good. Wait a minute, I am losing the weight. I thought I couldn't lose, whatever. Or it starts to peel away. But part of the process is giving yourself permission to say, you know what, I'm going to go all in. I'm going to do the Daniel fast without thinking about getting out, but I'm just going to do the work while I'm in there for the 4 weeks. And then you can start to identify some of these key triggers and these limiting beliefs and all of this other stuff. You learn a lot just in that process.
Yeah, yeah. So this book has been released today. Today's the
Mhm.
first day. So you can buy this book at whatever book retailer you use. You can go to Amazon, Barnes and Noble, whatever you use. Order it through your local bookstore. And if you do order this book or buy it, um, we want you to just send a screenshot and email it to the email address in the description of this video that you're watching. And we will add you to a special webinar that we're having next month, where we're going to share some behind the scenes insights and kind of the lowdown on this book, and things that we've covered as well as things that we've not covered in this book.
Mhm.
So if you want in on that, go ahead, buy it today. If you haven't bought it already, if you did buy it, just shoot us a email or DM us with a copy of your receipt, and we're going to add you to the list. We've got quite a few people already signed up for that. So if you want in, go ahead and do that today, September 8th.
Awesome. All right, guys.
All right, we'll
We'll
see you
see you
later.
next time.